Greetings to the wider St. Bart's community. I've been revisiting an old author lately that I've loved. His name is Parker Palmer, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. And he tells of his experience one time of boarding a 6 a.m. flight once on his way home from a speaking engagement. And his departure was delayed because the truck that brings the coffee to the planes had broken down. I mean, the plane can break down for all we care, but not the coffee truck at 6 a.m. After a while, the pilot had decided to take off without the coffee. "We want you to get to Detroit on time," he said, as the flight was bound. And Parker Palmer was up front where an irritable group of travelers sat, and they complained incessantly. Once they got in the air bound for Detroit, the lead flight attendant came to the center aisle with her mic and said, "Good morning. We're flying to Minneapolis today at an altitude of 30 feet," which evoked scorn for most, and a few laughed. Then she said, "Now that I have your attention, I know you are upset about the coffee. Well, get over it. Try sharing your stuff with your seatmates. That bag of pretzels you got on your last flight and put in your pocket, tear it open and pass them around. Gum, mints, candy, try sharing them. Send memes and news articles to each other. Show off the pictures of your kids and grandkids." As she went on, people began to laugh and actually did what she told them to do. This disgruntled scene turned into a veritable summer camp on the plane. And an hour later, as the attendant passed by Mr. Palmer's seat, he signaled to her and said, "What you did was really amazing. Where can I send you a letter of recommendation?" "Thanks," she said. "I'll get you a form." Then she leaned down and whispered, "The loaves and fishes are not dead." What a lovely story that he tells. This well-known tale of the feeding of the 5,000 is in all four Gospels, yet John's particular emphasis is on leading disciples to a deeper belief and recognition of the power of Jesus as the one who brings life to the world, as we'll see in the weeks to come. John is getting us underneath surface hungers to deeper places. Jesus withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself, this common example of intentional separation and solitude. But understand, in this case, Jesus was surely grieving and heartbroken, having just heard of the death of John the Baptist by beheading. John, his friend and forerunner, such an important person in his life. But when the crowds heard where Jesus was going, they followed him nonetheless to have their needs met, as they did. If I were to put myself in Jesus' shoes, I would think that I have nothing to give right now. But nonetheless, he still did what he could, which didn't seem like much, by the way, because he just invited the disciples to take action with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, which is where it led. Now, the Sunday school interpretation is that the bread and fish somehow magically multiplied, right? You've heard this story before if you're anything like me. And the human interpretation, or the metaphorical interpretation, but no less miraculous in my opinion, would suggest not the supernatural, but the miracle of human beings opening themselves up in generosity and giving and sharing. People reaching into their pockets or their robes, as it were, in response to one person's resources being offered. It started with 5 loaves and 2 fish, and there ended up being enough. Plenty, in fact. Generosity begets more generosity. This is an important message. It's a matter of risking putting our cards on the table as to what we have. And this is often only possible when our stuff or money or resources don't tether and control us as much anymore. There's a grace-filled message here, I think. While Jesus had little to give and surely wanted care for himself, he showed up nonetheless and empowered the disciples around him to do what they could, which set off this chain reaction. And the message for me and for us is that whatever you have to give is enough. Whatever you have to give is enough. Even and especially in your state of grief or weariness or limitations, whatever you have to give is enough. We may see our lack and struggles and limits as a nuisance and problems to overcome, whether it's in our work or parenting or perhaps a lack of employment or the stresses of our business currently or in erratic weather patterns or in an increasingly volatile and divided political landscape. And yet all of this is our reality. And where reality is, there the sacred presence is also. And simply showing up and giving what we can, miracles then seem to keep proceeding. Grace and abundance most often manifests itself in small, meager offerings, the next step, the next indicated action, which gives rise to the collective action, or at least inspires it. It is enough. If it means surviving another hour or another day, then that is what you have to give. If it's much, much more, then wonderful. Whatever you have to give is enough. After feeding the 5,000, Jesus then withdrew again to the mountains by himself, while the disciples set out across the Sea of Galilee for the return journey to Capernaum in their boat. It was dark and windy, and as the waters became turbulent, the disciples looked up to see Jesus walking toward them across the water, and they were terrified until Jesus reassured them with the words, "It is I, do not be afraid." And I want to leave us with this image of Jesus walking on the water. And I want to invite you to hear this as a metaphor, as a place of insight in our own spiritual journeys. We may long for the solidness of the boat and what that feels like, or even better, the land that we can walk upon. But honestly, walking on water feels viscerally relatable amidst the storms of our lives and often the constant fears of going under. Yet somehow we keep walking our way through this groundless in between, summoning the words, "It is I, don't be afraid. It is I, don't be afraid." May each of you know this grace and buoyancy today with whatever you are carrying with you in this space.